I'm Sarah Lancaster. I'm the industry programmer for this year's festival, and thank you for joining us for our next Meet With session, sponsored by the OMDC. Thank you very much. This, of course, is an ever popular session, the film funding session. So we're really pleased to have a selection across the country of film funders to speak with you this morning. Just a reminder that in addition to this session, we'll also have a session tomorrow morning on crowdfunding and on hybrid distribution. So check out that one as well. But I will now pass over to our moderator, John Galway, the president of the Harold Greenberg Fund, to run this morning's session. And just a reminder, if you can, please turn off your mobile phones. Thanks very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming out so early in the morning. We're always impressed. This panel always seems to fill the house. We won't let it go to our egos, because I know that if you put up a shingle that says we might be talking about money, it tends to draw a crowd. But before the panel starts, I have one request/demand of everybody, and it's not the mobile phone thing. I thought that I would request from everybody that during all the meetings and parties and events that everyone's going to, that I request that everybody see one film a day. Within your schedule, surely you can find 2 hours to actually go see what it is that the reason we're all in this business. And my request goes further. I want you all to see one film by a filmmaker that you've never seen before, and I want you to see some Canadian film. That's my request. I hope you can all do that. And I was also going to just take a brief survey of the room to kind of see who's here. I won't make you say your name or anything like that, but just so we can kind of tailor the questions and the moderation. And then we're also going to leave lots of time afterwards for questions, because I know from past years that there were lots of those. So can I first begin by asking, how many people here are not from Canada and maybe are thinking of co-producing with Canada and want to know kind of how that whole game works? Okay, so a good fair number. And then how many people here would classify themselves as kind of emerging producers, people who are contemplating developing financing for the first time? Excellent. And then how many have done this before but want to know what the ultimate secret to getting successful funding is? Okay. There's often never one ultimate secret, but we'll see if we can get to that. So before, as we were kind of preparing for the panel, I asked each person, I said we'd try to cover 3 basic questions. The first one, just so you kind of know where it's going, the first one will be describe your organization and your main film programs, how they work, if there's eligibility questions, what you're looking for, either in terms of genre or styles of filmmaking or economic benefit or whatever the main kind of criteria of the funds are. The second question is, how do emerging filmmakers interact with your organization, whether you have special programs or if there's a way of making sure that there's an executive producer on board that makes the project eligible, or if you have short film programs, that kind of thing. And then the third question was, how are you relating to all this new world of either online transmedia type experiences, so expanding your film, maybe you have a game concept that would interact with your film, but also the world of online distribution and crowdsourcing and all these kind of new ideas, whether your programs are being tailored towards any of those. So those are the kind of 3 basic questions, and then presumably we'll open it up. So I'll start actually to my furthest right with Dan Lyon with that first question. We'll kind of go around to just describe your main programs. Tell us what telefilm in your case is all about, what you're looking for, and maybe explain how the different offices work in the regions, etc.
Great. Good morning. And so this is an 8-hour session? Okay. There we go. Okay. Well, like a good politician, I'm just going to talk about what I want to talk about.
Never answer the question.
That's it. But if there's any specific questions afterwards, I promise to be extremely forthcoming. Telefilm basically is 200 plus film and TV loving people from coast to coast offices in Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, and Halifax. Our mandate is to foster and promote the development of the audiovisual industry in Canada. There are lots of programs and lots of guidelines. All of that stuff is available online. So it's telefilm.gc.ca, and I'll be happy to elucidate anything that people are aware of but perhaps find confusing, but I don't think it's a good use of my few minutes this morning to just try to relay all the guidelines. I would have to speak so quickly that it wouldn't be intelligible in any case. I really liked your opening comment, John, about it. You know, it's all about the films, and I would add to that, it's about the films. It's also all about the talent. So at Telefilm, we're really providing a new emphasis on promoting our films, and when I say our films, it's not just films that Telefilm's been involved in, but it's films involving Canadian talent, and we're promoting the talent itself, and we're promoting the films and the projects that they're involved in. There was a panel yesterday here about first-time filmmakers at TIFF, and I have to say that panel I found very, very gratifying. Some of the people had utilized Telefilm funding, and some had not. And I really want to say today that one of my key messages would be that it's not necessary to involve Telefilm in every Canadian project or every international treaty co-pro, other than in the co-pro aspect, we also are involved in validating that you in fact are complying with the treaty rules from the Canadian point of view. Two of the filmmakers on the panel are filmmaking partners who made a tiny little film. Depending on who you believe, it was made for somewhere between $10,000 and $50,000, and it's a feature with a beginning, middle, and an end, sound, actors, everything else that a normal film has. And a film like that, this film is called Amy George, is below the threshold of what Telefilm is actually allowed to get involved in. So our minimum threshold are films budgeted at $250,000. That's actually a pretty low threshold because that can include deferrals and so on. So a film like that, budgeted somewhere between $250 and let's say $1.25 million, would fall neatly into our low budget fund. That fund is director driven. We're primarily interested in building new directors. A new director would be a first or second timer, and ordinarily that person has shown some talent, some spark by making one or two shorts that have traveled well to festivals. There are some other ways of qualifying, and you can look at that online. Probably my favorite part of the low budget program is the post-production component, because a lot of people come to me and they say, oh, Dan, I just, I don't qualify because my short was in the, this film festival in the Ukraine, and that festival isn't listed as one of the eligible festivals, and so what do I do? And so what I always say is, don't wait for Telefilm, and don't be upset that you're not eligible. Go get a rough cut in the can. I mean, do what the Amy George people did. Do what Ingrid Veninger has done a number of times. Do what the filmmakers did on a film called The Baby Formula, and get the rough cut in the can, show it to us, and if it falls within our needs and if we have money available, we're able to actually help the filmmaker to complete the project. So in other words, your ticket to eligibility is the fact that you were able to put the rough cut in the can. I think it's fantastic. It reminds me a bit of how my dad told me he got his driver's license, which was that he went to the office at the time, this was a very long time ago, and they asked him, how did you get here? And he said, I drove, and they said, here's your license. Um, so low budget, 250,000 to 1.25. Most of them are not budgeted in the $1 million range for a very simple, practical reason, which is that Telefilm's cap under that program is $200,000. So if we commit $200,000 and you have an $800,000 gap, that's very, very difficult to fill. So most of the films would be budgeted at, let's say, $400,000 or $500,000 or $600,000, where you can fill the gap. You can fill it with a distributor commitment, broadcaster commitments, tax credits, deferrals, maybe some small private equity from somebody you know, and so on. Next step up in our programs we would call regional. Those are films typically budgeted between about $1 and $3 million, but we do have some flexibility. So as an example, the Edwin Boyd movie, is everybody familiar with Boyd? It's actually playing tonight by Nathan Morlando, who's a first-time feature filmmaker. That fell into our regional program. Why? Because it's talent building. Nathan had shown a lot of spark, a lot of talent, and we developed that script with him extensively over about a 5-year period. And finally, we're able to pull the trigger, and it's ready. And I encourage everybody to see it, and you'll be the judge, and the general public will be the judge of whether we did a good job or not. But I think we did. And then finally, the step up from that in terms of production, we call our national program. That's more box office driven. So those are films like Splice, Passchendaele, Bon Cop, you know, the list goes on. It does not mean that we throw out the talent mandate. It does not mean we throw out the artistic mandate. But what it does mean is that if we're committing a large amount of money, and normally it would be north of $1 million, often it might be in the 1.5, 2, or even $2.5 million range. If we're committing that kind of money, we're expecting to reach a large audience. So that's in a nutshell what we're doing in production. Are we dealing with what are we looking for now, or are we going to wait?
No, for those programs, why don't you just say kind of, you know.
Okay, so basically what are we looking for? First of all, we do look for an appropriate track record by the team. So the team is the director, the writer, the producer. If there's no one on the team who's made a theatrical feature film before, or nobody on the team who's been through the Canadian funding system, one of our first questions is, would it be possible to beef up your team? And it's not a question we ask to be mean or because of a black letter guideline. It's because things tend to go more smoothly when there's at least one person on the team who's been through it before. And often that person could be an executive producer. And it might be a person who is very experienced and is prepared to act as a mentor and is prepared to work for a very small fee. You're not expecting that person to be on set the whole time. You're not expecting that person to be, you know, physically filling out applications and that kind of thing. But they are available for consultation, and Telefilm does rely on them to fix problems when things start going awry. We have certain goals, including genre diversity, new voices, and things that do change from year to year, but we're not overly prescriptive. In my past life, I was developing an IRA story, and we were within an inch of signing a big deal with Paramount. And literally on the day we were supposed to sign, the senior executive from the studio said, Dan, there's just one more thing. By the way, if anyone ever says to you there's just one more thing, you have to listen carefully. So here was her one more thing. It can't be the IRA. We think it should be the mafia. So I was very, very early in my career at the time, and I turned to the senior producer. I said, what just happened? And he said, they're not making this movie. And sure enough, they didn't make the movie, they didn't finance the movie, and in fact, no one has financed the movie. people ask me a lot about the way that Telefilm interacts with creative people when they come in to pitch projects and when, in fact, we're already in bed with them, marching towards late-stage development, packaging, and hopefully production. Using Edwin Boyd as an example, so Boyd's the story of a bank robber in 1950s Toronto. It's based on a true story. Telefilm has a genre diversity mandate, as I've just said. So what if I had said to Nathan and Allison at the time, you know, we're really interested in family films, so do you think you could give Edwin Boyd a talking dog as a companion? And by the way, I would never say that, but that is a real example from a blog I've been reading by a Hollywood writer about the kinds of comments that he has gotten in his career from the studios. It's crazy. And we all do come to our jobs with certain biases that we have to subsume. So for example, still using the same movie as an example, when I was a kid, one of my favorite movies was called The Doberman Gang. And that's about someone who had trained a group of dogs to rob banks. So what if I had said to Nathan, you know what would be really cool? Why don't you put a dog on the, you know, as one of the Boyd gang members? Wouldn't that be cool? And, you know, I'm being purposely outrageous here, but the problem with that dynamic is that he might say, well, first of all, I'm not sure whether or not Dan's kidding, but secondly, I really want the money. And so maybe, you know, maybe it's not such a bad idea. Maybe I should do that. We're not looking for people to do what we say. And in fact, as the team leader, my instructions to my staff are, I never want to hear in a meeting, I think you should change the cat to a dog. I think you should change the girl to a boy. We don't make those kinds of comments. What we do is we ask questions. We ask questions about what the intended emotional effect is on the audience. We ask questions about who the intended audience is. We ask a lot of questions, and over the course of the relationship, I actually feel that we've made a lot of positive difference to the projects, and numerous filmmakers have thanked us for that role. Building talent is a really important job at Telefilm, so I'm happy to see a lot of emerging people today. It's not the only thing that we do. We're in the process of working with the industry to change the measurables by which we measure the success of our projects, and one of them involves another group of people in this room, which are the filmmakers from other countries, because we think it's really important to leverage the Canadian talent and Canadian dollars to make larger films and films that are going to bring jobs to Canadians, films that are going to bring cultural success to the country, and work together with other countries under the co-pro treaties. So that's really important. So we have talent building measures of success, we have box office measures of success, but not just theatrical. So we're starting to find ways now to look at DVD, to look at international sales, to look at VOD, and all the other ways that people see movies when we judge how we're doing and how our clients are doing in the marketplace. It's probably enough as an intro.
Thanks, Dan. I guess starting with Telefilm always has its risks because you cover the country and cover many aspects of the industry. But now the group in the middle here all run provincial agencies, and so we'll get them to talk about the different funding opportunities and models and location support that they have, and maybe we'll go west to east. They're conveniently aligned that way. We'll start with BC.
Hi. My name is Robert Wong. I'm the Vice President of Tax Credits and Development at British Columbia Film. We are the provincial agency that administers the film funding programs in the province. Really, we don't have the scope that Telefilm has and the types of programs that they offer. We essentially have two sets of programs for filmmakers. We have development funding, and then we administer the tax credit programs. So when you are in development, We do have a number of programs that support feature filmmakers, television producers, as well as digital media artists as well. Once you get into the green light to produce your production, essentially the province has used a tax credit vehicle as their main production arm. So money comes in at the front end through our BC film programs, through development. They all are non-recoupable advances that we provide. If you're not a BC producer, you will have to be partnered with a BC producer. So we do look for interprovincial co-productions and treaty co-productions. They do qualify under the development funding stream. And then once, again, you go into production, really the tax credits are the main vehicle that support that funding. I'll keep it short for now.
And now we have Ontario.
Okay. Hi, thanks. My name is Christine Murphy, and I'm the Director of Industry Development at the Ontario Media Development Corporation. So we're the provincial agency in Ontario. And what's, I guess, different or unique about OMDC is we support 6 creative industries in Ontario. So we provide support to film, television, interactive digital media, including the game industry, music, book publishing, and magazines. And so there's definitely not enough time for me to talk about all of that. I'll just focus very quickly on film. In terms of what both Dan and Robert have said, OMDC supports or relates to film in development financing, in production financing. We also serve as Ontario's Film Commission, so in terms of location support, and we administer the tax credits for film and television in Ontario. We also have, so in development, we do come in late stage development, and we were involved in Edwin Boyd. It is a great film, please go see it, it's terrific. So we do relate to, I don't want to say emerging, but you said emerging. I don't think of them as emerging, because anyway, we do relate to emerging or more junior filmmakers. They often have more senior producers attached. We do have production financing. It's not a huge amount of production financing. We have up to $400,000 or 15% to a maximum of $400,000, 15% of a budget for Ontario producers. We will look at interprovincial co-productions as well as international co-productions. That's 2 minutes on production. We do have market support, so we will support producers, whether they're emerging producers or more senior producers, to travel to market, different international markets to look for financing elsewhere. Tax credits come in at the end very similar to BC. We have a foreign credit, we have a domestic credit. One is labor-based, one is spend-based. I think I'll end there because otherwise I really could spend the next 2 hours talking. And with that, I'll hand it to Dan.
And I'm Anne McKenzie. I'm the president and CEO of Film Nova Scotia. And we're all about film, television, and digital production in Nova Scotia and with Nova Scotia filmmakers and their co-production partners. We do have a whole slew of programs. We have one tax credit, which is for film television, and it's a service one or a local one. So it doesn't have the content or ownership type requirements. It's a labor credit, and it can be as high as 65% of your labor. So all film and television, emerging, established, can access that tax credit. We have a separate tax credit for digital media productions and gaming and things like that. On our direct investment programs, we do have a slew. We have development loans, which is for emerging or established filmmakers. We have equity investments for emerging or established filmmakers. We have travel market assistance programs to help get out to raise money or to promote films if they get in festivals. And we have several programs that are just for emerging filmmakers. One of them is a brand new program that we're working with Telefilm on. It's a first feature award, and it's a cash prize for a first feature of $110,000, and then they can usually get another $30,000 in tax credit. So it's not a lot of money, but it's $140,000 cash that an emerging filmmaking team can do their first feature film. We also have, we fund a grant program for short films, which it's called Film 5, and so it's to help teams of young filmmakers get their calling card films. We have a similar program that we do with CBC for television filmmakers. And in Nova Scotia, we have a lot of crossover between television and feature film at the emerging side anyway. And yeah, I guess really that's about it. We do have a lot of programs. I have more for emerging filmmakers on the training side, and any one of our direct investments, our loans, our equity, our tax credit, can be used for both domestic production and foreign production.
Before I describe the Harold Greenberg Fund, I've got some questions for the provinces. In terms of, I've got two. So in the first one, in terms of tax credits, is there a certain minimum level where it doesn't actually work so well, or could you really come in with, you know, Amy George at let's say $50,000 if you counted the kind of you know, people you paid with pizza and beer, and actually made them defer? Would it work at that level?
I'll start. In British Columbia, the tax credits are all labor-based tax credits. So if you're paying them with pizza and beer, then you can be qualified, but you would get 0 tax credits on that. But if you actually do pay them, there is no minimum threshold for domestic filmmakers. So if you're coming in with a $50,000 production and you are actually paying people with cash, then yes, you could get a tax credit. Really, it comes down to, is it worth your time to do it, do the paperwork and the administration? But if it is worth your time, definitely you can come to us. Is there a filing fee? There's a minimum filing fee to it.
But is it possible it could exceed the tax credit?
No.
Okay, it's slightly different in Ontario. There's a choice, similar to what Bob said about the domestic credit. It's called the Ontario Film and Television Tax Credit. Again, same thing. If you've paid in pizza and beer, that's not a labor-based amount. But in Ontario, we have our foreign credit or production services tax credit. Domestic producers have a choice. You can apply for the domestic tax credit, which is 35% of labor. You get a feature film, first-time feature film bonus as well, up to 40%. Side of the GTA, another 10% if you were an emerging filmmaker. But in our service credit, it's 25% of eligible expenditures spent in the province. So including both labor as well as your studio equipment, that sort of thing. So depending on the size of your budget, you could run the numbers and determine that what we call the spend credit in Ontario might work better for you.
And in Nova Scotia, ours is strictly a labor tax credit. The base credit's 50%. There's a 10% incentive if you shoot outside the city, and there's another 5% incentive for frequent filming. And it's on labor, so obviously you would have to pay that labor. So while there's no threshold, you actually have to pay the labor to get the credit back.
And my second question is, if I'm a filmmaker or a writer developing a project, and say I know I have to go to Nova Scotia because of the setting, or to BC because of the setting, or else I want to go there because you know, our industry follows the cash often. Say if I'm in Ontario and I'm looking to Nova Scotia, how do I figure out who I might want to partner with, or how do you build those kind of bridges?
We have a film commission as well. We're not just a funding agency, so anybody that wants to shoot in Nova Scotia would contact our office, and we are very happy to introduce potential co-production partners. We are also very happy to read a script, throw up a website. You could see if anything's suitable, fly in a director if you're really interested. So we're kind of on the ground, get rid of a lot of the headaches and the legwork in the beginning. We'll even liaise you with potential production managers or line producers or the business agents. So we take a lot of that initial headache out of the way.
I think the one thing I would add to that, Ontario the Film Commission does similar things. The other thing the OMDC does, and often in partnership with TIFF, and I should mention this, we run a lot of initiatives where we bring producers together, both from across the country as well as internationally. We have 2 that we're running this week at TIFF. One is called Producers Lab Toronto, which is 12 European producers meeting with 12 Canadian producers and from across the country, so not only Ontario producers. We also run a financing forum during the festival, which is putting together 20 Canadian projects with 21 international producers to look at bringing in that piece of financing. So at OMDC, one thing we do try to focus on is working across the different industries. How can we really connect people to make those relationships work? It's a tough business. It's hard to finance things, and we're very supportive of co-productions interprovincially, internationally. So we do a lot of that kind of brokering.
We also fund, and a lot of the people on this panel do, but it happens in Halifax, Nova Scotia, an international co-production conference called Strategic Partners, which brings in a couple of hundred delegates, some from Canada and a lot from international destinations to work on potential co-productions that they're looking to raise money. And Strategic Partners also has a relationship with Transatlantic Partners, which covers a couple of other foreign co-production conferences in Germany and in New York. So that's it's an amazing festival or conference as well, and that starts next week.
I think you just have to move to BC, and that's it. But really, I just echo Christine's and Anne's comments. I mean, we really do offer the same types of programs. And I do want to put a plug in for Strategic Partners. It's an excellent festival, and it's we do support BC producers to go to Strategic Partners. So if you do have an opportunity, do that.
And I'll just briefly describe Astral's, the Harold Greenberg Fund. We are 3 film-loving people based in Toronto. And we're associated with TMN, which is the movie network, which is a subscription-based movie service and in Eastern Canada, and also manages the HBO Canada brand, part of Astral, which is a larger media company. And we essentially handle their film development for those networks. So we have a separate organization and a board of 7 people from the industry. We have development and film equity to finance production. We start in terms of development, starting at treatment, and build all the way through to what we call our polish and packaging phase. And that, I think that's our kind of core role. The fund was set up as a fund to develop Canadian screenwriters and screenwriting talent. And we hopefully roll those projects or get involved in other ones into production financing, and we can give 10% of the budget up to $200,000 in terms of production equity. And then anything that we're involved with, TMN gets a first look at for acquiring the license for the pay television. So you can also, in addition, it's kind of the soft landing towards a license, which can either go directly into the financing or help support the MG from a Canadian distributor. We use what we call a portfolio approach. So we're looking for, throughout both in terms of what we develop and what we finance, a range of films. We don't have specific targets of so many big budget or so many low budget, but in a given year, we might be involved in a film like Grown Up Movie Star, which was made in Newfoundland for $800,000, and then Barney's Version, which was made in Toronto for, let's say, a little bit more than $800,000. And so, we know we have certain different expectations, kind of as Dan was describing. They have more of particular programs aimed at budget size, but obviously you have more of an expectation for a bigger project with stars than one that's developing talent. And in terms of our selection process, it's this board of 7 people choose the projects, and we're proudly subjective. We base it really on what we think in terms of script, what will work with an audience, asking those same kind of questions that Dan described. And then look towards the team involved. We do have a eligibility criteria, which is that somebody on the team has produced 2 features, but that can be an executive producer, or if you're a writer-director, there's no criteria as to how many films you've had made, as long as you're partnering with a producer that can see the project through. And we're just about, in terms of kind of quickly answering the emerging filmmaker role, other than having that, being eligible by having that involvement of a more senior person, we're about to announce a short film program that we're doing kind of in-house. Before, we've always supported organizations like the Film Center and their short film program, but we're going to have a program that hopefully will fund each year 2 to 3 short films that inform a feature. So it's a producer-director team working towards working out a concept that will maybe ultimately become a feature, or else testing themselves in a genre that they want to go to. So if they've maybe never made a comedy, they want to make a comedic short first to inform kind of the journey towards a feature. And so we'll be announcing more specifics on that shortly. We have 3 deadlines a year in terms of development, but equity has come in as you are, but we're what is called a last-in funder, so we generally wait for somebody like Telefilm or a large chunk of the financing to be there so that we know that the project is more than likely to go ahead. We do relate to co-productions as long as they're more than 40% Canadian, so we can't go kind of below that threshold. We want obviously a Canadian producer and a writer and/or director involved. We're proud to say that we've obviously got a number of films in this festival this year, but in terms of co-production, we were involved in a film called In Darkness, which is not in English. It's in Polish, German, and Yiddish. Developed by Canadians, but then directed by Agnieszka Holland. So in terms of co-production, there's a world of international co-production. There's a world of opportunity out there, and we're trying to force ourselves to be as international as possible. And so that wraps that up, I guess. The final question maybe I'll ask very quickly, and then we'll open it up, is all this new media stuff. How other than specific funds for new media, the intersection with film. There's a great example of Vincenzo Natali's building a project, Neuromancer, that is a script, but also it has a game component. Online distribution, are we still requiring that your films are in theaters, or are there ways around using kind of either social media or direct sales avenues? So I'll start maybe with Dan, and we'll go from there.
So there's a lot of aspects to the new world order, or should I say the emerging world order. One is that, at least for the time being, we're still assuming that the first window is going to be theatrical. So it's going to be in a dark box, and that people are going to be paying to see the film. As society shifts, we may need to change that. Or perhaps the transition would be as simple as that theatrical window would be shared by other windows, whether it's VOD or even direct-to-video at the same time, or online at the same time, whatever it is. So we're definitely prepared to make the shift, but I don't think the business has quite made that shift yet. In terms of financing films, I'll just mention briefly that we've had at least one, and there might be more than one, low-budget film that used crowdfunding, and that in no way is incompatible with what we do. So in other words, I don't think they'd mind if I give the example. It was a film called At Home by Myself with You. They did a very successful campaign. They raised a sum of money, and they came to us and said, we've raised some money, we've got a broadcaster, we have some deferrals, we still have a shortfall, can Telefilm help us? And in that example, the happy answer was yes, we can help you. In terms of distribution, we have a specific program. It's called Web Cine 360. That is a specific fund of up to $50,000 per project. The money goes to the distributor for early stage online marketing. So in other words, it's not the normal kind of post-completion costs of for example, paying for banners on the internet during the theatrical release. That's normal. That would go into the normal P&A budget. This is a special fund that encourages early use of social media. So we're looking at use more than 6 months before the theatrical release of the film, and preferably starting during production. And this is a new fund for us in English. It's going pretty well. We're finding that a lot of our lower budget film makers are extremely creative in making use of the net. I'll give you a couple examples. There's a film that wrapped recently in the Niagara area. It's a zombie comedy called Dead Before Dawn. And the filmmakers did a daily online blog while they were shooting. I don't know how they found time to do it, but they did it. And so what they achieved with that is they created and expanded an online community that was following the production and hopefully will follow it right through into its exploitation down the road. There's another film that some of you may be familiar with called Hobo with a Shotgun. They had teaser trailers online at a very early stage, including one in which the producer of the film was murdered, and that was a lot of fun. They then did a very inexpensive shooter game on Facebook. That was a very creative use of online. And there's a documentary on the subject of chocolate that created for, I think, again, a very low amount of money, a mobile app where people can use the app to find out where they could buy fair trade chocolate, something like that. So it's possible to make very good use of new media for promotional purposes without expending a lot of money. Telefilm does encourage it, and we will support it both in the special WebCine program and also as part of the regular P&A support that we offer to distributors.
Okay, I'll give you guys 3 minutes so we can have some questions.
I don't need 3 minutes.
I didn't mean each either.
Just look at me for 30 seconds and then move on. You know, we recognize at British Columbia Film, we do recognize that there is a new world order. And unfortunately, in the production side of things, which is the tax credits, the legislation was drafted in 1998. There was no such thing as the interweb back then. You know, it's one of those things that that hasn't changed at the same pace as technology has. So having said that, we do still fall back to the traditional theatrical release. However, being a tax specialist, if you know anything about income tax, you can define things a certain way. You can do some, quote, tax planning around it so that we can make the transmedia product work within the tax credit system. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I might take more than 30 seconds. I'll talk fast. Dan's example of the chocolate mobile application, OMDC funded that through our Interactive Digital Media Fund. So what we're also trying to do in that fund is enable film and television producers to work with interactive companies and come up with whatever that element is that makes that content into something that's transmedia. We're seeing that more and more in terms of what we do in feature film, in interactive, and in television, and frankly in books and magazines as well. In our main film fund, yes, the same deal. We do require theatrical distribution in a traditional mode. We are looking at what does that mean and what should we be doing to assist filmmakers. Many of the films we support, we do see the online blogging, we do see, you know, the mobile trailers that are going along beforehand. At OMDC, we also have another program that's called the Partnership Fund. I won't get into a lot of details, but it is supporting the Vincenzo's film, so it is not the film, but the technology around bringing games and movies together. So I can talk about that after if people are interested. It would take far too long, but essentially anything that's a collective project with a group of content creators that has a broad-based benefit that looks at new ways of addressing technology or content solutions, we'll take a look at. It's a very competitive program, but it's done some really interesting things in terms of 3D technology, in terms of mobile online applications. It's quite an interesting fund, and I'll leave it at that. Same with tax credits. Unfortunately, they were written around the same time as BC's, and so they are set, but we are looking at ways of trying to work within that.
In Nova Scotia, we're totally open to that on our equity side. If we put an equity investment in a project, as long as it's under 1.25 million, it doesn't require a distributor, so we leave it up to the filmmaker to try to explore where they can best exploit it. Our tax credit is ambivalent as well, and our digital media tax credit obviously is for digital applications. we're finding a lot of the emerging filmmakers are really engaging the social media. The Holy Shotgun filmmaker is a Nova Scotia filmmaker, and they started even before production. They really ramped it up. They did a trailer at South by Southwest, and it won a competition with Quentin Tarantino and Rodriguez. So they, right from the get-go, and they do that with everything they do, whether they have funding attached or not. They just go out and shoot it guerrilla style, and they're promoting it all the time. And we have quite a few emerging filmmakers doing things like that. We had another short film under $1 million called Roller Town, and it's going to be opening the Atlantic Film Festival next week, and it's on a comedy troupe out of Nova Scotia called Picnic Face, and they did crowdsourcing as well. And so we just have, there's probably around 6 feature films around that budget, between 1.25 and say 700,000 last year for emerging filmmakers, and they are so generating the attention and even the investment through this crowdsourcing online. They get it. It's like water. They don't even think about it. They engage the social media to get that audience, which helps them no matter where they're going to release it. So we're totally encouraging this.
Okay, I'll just, we'll start to have questions, but as we get that organized, because there'll be a mic that goes around, I'll just, basically we're the same answer in terms of the Greenberg Fund, but I would point to Roller Town. You can go on their website and see what they did in terms of crowdsourcing, but we were involved in that project, so a traditional investment, as was the Halifax office of Telefilm. So there certainly are ways of mixing it, and basically what they did is they sold credits and outrageous stunts that this troupe would perform for, you know, an investment of $1,000 or $5,000 or whatever, and so we managed to make the.
Would change his middle name if you put in 10,000.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with some questions. I see one right up here in the front row, because that's, you know, the easiest one to see at the beginning and the hardest one to bring the mic to. And we've got about 15 minutes.
Hi, James Buffin, POV Magazine. My question is pertaining to Ontario-based theatrical docs. I'm wondering what the opportunities are in the various agencies that are Ontario-based for theatrical docs.
Just in terms of OMDC, yes, we do support theatrical docs through our film fund. I should have said that. Every year we've probably done between 2 and 4 documentaries. In terms of requirements in for a doc, we will look at documentaries with a budget of $600,000. So they're not small docs, but they don't have the same criteria as our feature film. We evaluate and adjudicate the documentaries separately from dramatic feature films. And we've had some great docs. We're involved in the Rush documentary. I don't know if you saw it. It was a great doc. We have 2 coming up. We don't have any this year in TIFF. We've just funded a couple we'll be announcing next week. Very happy.
Telefilm has a partnership with Rogers. It's a theatrical documentary fund. By coincidence, the next deadline is September 30th, so it's only a couple weeks away. So if anyone's interested, I really encourage you to go online, and you'll have to get your act together really quickly to apply. We've been involved in a lot of great docs, including the Echo Pirate doc that played a week or so ago at the Open Roof Festival, the Hugh Hefner doc, and many really interesting docs. Again, these are ambitious docs because they're intended for first window theatrical.
Okay, there's a question in the middle there. Tazo.
Ron Grainer, Lost Music Productions. I have a doc in rough cut. I got about 15 minutes ready, more or less ready to view, but I'd like to, at some stage, complete it, add another 9 minutes, and get it to a 24-minute half hour. The question actually is about my editor and second shooter. He deferred his fee. I started off paying editors at $30 an hour, which was like half price, and then this guy volunteered and spent tons and tons of hours. So how could I come back like a year after I've done the rough cut and then apply because it's not really finished yet, and try to get these guys some money.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I guess there's 2 points. There's completion funding, and then also in terms of tax credits, how do you deal with this? I haven't paid the guy yet, or how do you kind of balance that?
With respect to deferrals, and this probably holds true for the other two programs that I'm going to speak for, that deferrals are not considered eligible for tax credit purposes. Again, as I mentioned earlier, it's based on what you actually pay somebody. However, if they come back, you come across some money and are able to pay them, then yes, you can come back after the fact and claim tax credits against those amounts.
Our tax credit did allow deferrals for the longest time, and it still does, but just to be safe, we just encourage people pay the deferrals and reinvest it, swap the checks.
So in other words, you pay somebody $100 on Monday, and they give you back 75 of it 3 days later. As an investment, they reinvest the money. Yeah.
I'll just say briefly that there is a completion component of the theatrical doc program. We're usually involved in 2 completion projects a year. And but the only thing is, you mentioned you have a rough cut, but it's 15 minutes long. I don't think I'd be prepared to consider that the rough cut of a theatrical doc.
That might be more for television, yeah. In the middle there.
I had a two-headed question here about junior or emerging filmmakers. First, it seems like you guys are all, how do you find, it sounds like you're all talking about these younger filmmakers teaming up with senior filmmakers, producers, executive producers. What kind of credentials do you look for in those more experienced executive producers, like the types of films they've made and their experience? And then the second part, more towards telefilm, is what are those film festivals or those accepted festivals, for example, that Nathan Orlando you talked about created some buzz and spark with? Could you expand on that? Are those just Canadian film festivals? Are those, is it just potential in the actual short film? And I look forward to I'm an aspiring, well, I am a filmmaker, junior, as you can tell. So, yeah, I look forward to your answer.
Well, our guidelines, and you can definitely read this online. There's an appendix. It lists all the festivals. No, they are not just Canadian festivals. It's a long list. It's at least, 30, 40 festivals, both in Canada and around the world. The other thing I should mention is that some of the directors who qualify for the low-budget program have done a little bit of work in television. And this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine. I love giving somebody a chance who's done some episodic work on TV. I love giving them a chance to make their first feature. The next thing that I'll say is that under the main program, so the regional program, not the low-budget program that's director-driven, if a producer is interested in your project and the producer comes to Telefilm saying, I've optioned this script, it's fantastic, and I have this fantastic young director who may or may not be the same person as the person who wrote the screenplay, we're not then asking, well, what, as a ticket to admission, we don't then say, well, you can't come in unless that person has had 2 shorts at one of the certain, named film festivals. That criteria goes out the window because we're then relating to the producer and the producer's ability to shepherd the project.
I would say that's similar for the OMDC in terms of we do see first-time producers and directors in, and they are attached to senior producers, and contractually, we're taking a look at that senior producer, and frankly, if they are interested in your project, sometimes those projects are the best ones because obviously the senior producer is quite passionate about what they want to do, and it's a terrific learning experience often for the first-time team, and you have that experience, but there's just more. I think there's more effort and more attention paid to those projects. So we've had some great success in those kinds of relationships. So we're very happy to look at those.
So,
And in Nova Scotia, we'll also help the emerging filmmaker find the experienced producer. This hobo with a shotgun, our filmmaker team, they were very inexperienced. They shot a lot, but nothing was produced large scale. And so that's where co-production comes in, and we were very fortunate to be able to arrange for them to co-produce with an Ontario very experienced producer. So we're very open to that scenario as well.
I'll say, because you had asked also about what are the qualifications of the exec producer or the experienced producer. That's a dialogue we're definitely very willing to engage in. Because we're at the Toronto Film Festival, I will say there's something like 25 Canadian theatrical features in the festival this year, about the same number last year and about the same number the year before, and it's not all the same producers. So roughly speaking, just by going through the TIFF guide for 3 years, I would say you'll come up with a list of 50 Canadian producers who've made some promising, or now, with respect to the films that have already been released, some of them have made some very successful theatrical features. So that's a good way to start networking and figure out who's doing what.
And I was just going to say, in terms of particularly the selective programs, there's a kind of perceived risk of getting involved in a project with emerging filmmakers. And so I think your job as an emerging filmmaker, even with that established producer on board, is to make sure that they're making us know about you, so that make it easy for us to see your shorts, know your work, the context of those shorts, why they inform what you're trying to do in feature, what the limitations were. I made this for this much money, those kind of issues, because it's your job to kind of represent yourself, right? So we all try to see as much film as we can, but it's particularly in short film impossible to see everything, and so you should make sure you're trying to take meetings with us, and all the agencies are open to that, but you have to drive it to a certain degree. Some people are excellent at that. Some people need to kind of challenge themselves in that area.
Can I mention something, John? One thing that we encourage and we financially support for our emerging filmmakers is that they work with, especially if you're starting with the shorts. So if you work with a recognized short film sales company like a Watt Media, and they will take a short film, and we get them to take at least 8 a year, and they'll submit them into 50 festivals. It's a part of a festival plan they have, and it's great exposure for emerging filmmakers to showcase their work and then to draw attention for their next short film. So that's a really good opportunity to look at as well.
Let me just sneak in, since we're talking a little bit about shorts, that although Telefilm doesn't fund the production of shorts, we are involved in promoting shorts. So, for example, was a program at Cannes this year that was very successful in focusing on our short filmmakers. But the other thing that I wanted to mention is that shorts are a great calling card when you can come in to Telefilm and the other funders and actually show a short that has something to do with the feature that you want to make. 2 quick examples I'll give you. One is a movie called The Whistleblower that's now on screen. Goldwyn is the distributor in the US and E1 in Canada. Larissa Kondracki, who's a Canadian filmmaker, was not known to us when she and her producer came in with that script and that project, but she was able to show us a short on the same subject matter as the proposed feature. Another example from a couple years back was Richie Maida and what turned out to be a very good film called Amal, A-M-A-L, and Richie had made a short on exactly the same subject as the feature he proposed to make. And in both cases, we were able to fund those filmmakers. In one case, under the regional program, and in the other case, because it was a big international co-pro, under the national program.
Okay, we've been given the 5-minute signal here. I'll pick in the front row here. Go for it.
My name's Dan Eisen. I'm a director.
If we can get it on the mic, that'd be great for the video as well.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, my name is Dan Eisen. I'm a director with one feature under my belt, which was made outside of the funding system, traditional. My question is, with a experienced producer with funding experience, looking at making a second feature, how much weight would you put on the movie being set in Canada, aside from having a lot of Canadian talent, how important it is now? This, I guess, can be asked to everyone here, but starting with telefilm. How much weight, how much more likely is one to get funding if it is set in Toronto, et cetera?
I mean, one way I can answer that question is just to point you to some of the films that we've funded. So some are set here. Take This Waltz, which is Sarah Pauli's wonderful, wonderful film, is emphatically set in Toronto. We think that's great. But it's not she didn't come to us with a script set in South Dakota, and we said, well, what's wrong with Toronto? It happened organically. She wrote a project set in Toronto. Richie Maida, who I just mentioned, he wrote a movie set in New Delhi. And, the movie's set in New Delhi. So I think that budget does come into play, because we don't go in for disguised locations. Sometimes the location is not important. In other words, it's kind of a generic location. But if your project is, let's say, about a famous court case that happened in Boston, but for financial reasons and because you're a member of the Canadian community, you're going to do that movie in Toronto, and you're going to dress Toronto to look like Boston, we're not going to go for that.
It doesn't, in terms of our program, it depends on the script and what makes sense. OMDC was involved in Cairo Time, shot in Cairo. We're involved in Dangerous Method, shot in Europe. Edwin Boyd, which we're also involved with, is a Toronto-based story, shot in Sault Ste. Marie. So it depends on the budget, it depends on the story. We're very open to that, or Nova Scotia or BC sometimes.
I think the main criteria also is how is it relevant to Canadian audiences, which you can make an argument about, something set in New Delhi, but we're also looking to how it's going to resonate with Canadians. Well, we can do one more question in the back standing up. How about we do that? And then I think we're going to have to wrap it up.
Hey, my name is Craig Jackson. We have a feature documentary that we released at Hot Docs this year. And we've screened at festivals throughout Canada, but we might have an opportunity to go into the States in 2012. And just in regards to the post-production funding through telefilm, I was wondering if there are changes that we want to make and we want to tighten things up, improve the sound mix, just bring it up to a more theatrical quality. And I was wondering kind of what the stipulations are around that sort of thing.
Or Dan, maybe just enhancements in general for fiction or documentary?
Yeah, for enhancements really are for films that we've already invested in. So if we've invested in a film and let's say we've already put in $500,000, the film gets delivered to us, and then the producer comes back and says, you know what, if only we had another $50,000, we could license the following 2 songs that would be perfect. It wasn't contemplated at the time that we submitted the project to you, but we really want to do something special. And if the distributors, both in Canada and foreign, agree with that and are prepared to kick in a little bit of the money, we'll kick in some money too. In terms of your specific question on the doc, it's a bit of a gray zone, because it sounds like you completed the doc. It already got out into the market in Canada. Is that what happened?
We've done festivals in Canada only.
Right.
So
Is there a possibility of a commercial theatrical release?
Well, we picked up distribution with Keno Smith, so there's going to be a theatrical in the spring of next year.
Okay. So I would say that Robin is really familiar with our funds and programs, so he's going to help you shape an approach to telefilm, and then you'll come in to visit me with Robin. How's that?
Thank you.